In the fading sunlight that streaked through the tall windows of the Williams family's Beacon Hill mansion, Mason sat alone, paintbrush suspended midair. The 21-year-old studied his canvas with critical eyes. The Boston skyline beyond the glass, a stark contrast to the vibrant, abstract emotions he'd captured in paint. His art was his voice, the one language his family refused to understand. Mason, Robert Williams' commanding voice echoed up the staircase. Family dinner starts in 10 minutes sharp. Don't make us wait again. Mason's hand trembled slightly, smearing blue across the corner of his work. 4 years had passed since he'd come out to his family, yet the chill in his father's tone remained unchanged. The prestigious Williams family, pillars of Boston's legal elite, had a son who was both gay and an artist. Two strikes that his father could never quite forgive. He remembered with painful clarity that afternoon at 17, when he'd excitedly showed his father the invitation to his first art exhibition. Robert had glanced at it dismissively. "This nonsense won't pay the bills," he'd said, tossing the invitation aside. "Connor secured an internship at the firm today. That's what real achievement looks like." Later that night, Mason had wept in his bedroom, the rejection cutting deeper than any physical wound. It was his Aunt Eleanor who had secretly funded that exhibition, his mother's eccentric sister who had bucked family tradition to build Eleanor Tech, now valued at $75 million. While everyone else saw Mason as the family disappointment, Eleanor saw potential. Dinner that evening was a battlefield of silent tensions. Connor, fresh from Yale Law with honors, dominated the conversation while Mason pushed food around his plate. When Mason attempted to describe his latest project combining art and technology, his mother Elizabeth quickly redirected the conversation to Connor's accomplishments. "Have you thought about law school applications yet?" Robert asked Mason pointedly. "It's not too late to follow a sensible path." Mason's gaze drifted to the family portrait above the fireplace, himself noticeably smaller in the frame, as if the artist had been instructed to diminish his presence. In this house, he would always be the forgotten son. That weekend at Eleanor's lakeside retreat in Berkshires, Mason finally breathed freely. Eleanor's home was a stunning blend of cutting-edge technology and breathtaking art, a testament to her belief that the two worlds belong together. "They'll never understand you, Eleanor said, handing Mason a cup of tea as they watched the sunset over the water. "But someday the world will. Art speaks truths that business and law never can. Your vision to merge technology with artistic expression, that's the future." Mason. "And I've always invested in the future." As the lake waters reflected the dying light, Mason felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Perhaps being forgotten by his family would free him to be remembered by the world in ways they could never imagine. If you've ever felt misunderstood by those who should support you most, remember that sometimes your greatest strength lies in embracing what makes you different. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales of finding yourself when others try to lose you. The ballroom of Oakmont Country Club glittered with wealth and privilege as Boston's elite gathered to celebrate Connor Williams' graduation from Yale Law School. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over silk dresses and tailored suits, while waiters weaved through the crowd with champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. Mason adjusted his navy blue blazer, the most formal attire he owned, feeling conspicuously underdressed among the sea of designer labels. His mother had frowned when he arrived without a tie, her disappointment evident in her tight smile. Now, as Mason surveyed the room, he noticed his place card had been relegated to a corner table near the kitchen entrance, far from the family's central position. "Quite the spectacle, isn't it?" A familiar voice cut through the ambient chatter. Eleanor appeared beside him, elegant in a deep emerald suit rather than the expected evening gown. "Your brother certainly knows how to command attention." In the center of the room, Connor held court, his Yale Law diploma seemingly hanging invisible above his head like a halo. His confident laugh carried across the space as he regaled a circle of admirers with tales of his academic conquests. "Harvard's program is excellent, of course," Connor was saying to an older gentleman with judicial bearing. "But Yale offers connections that simply can't be replicated. The right network is everything in this field." Speaking of connections, Eleanor murmured to Mason, I believe that's Lawrence Donovan by the bar, the venture capitalist I mentioned. He's been looking to diversify into the tech art startups. Perhaps now's your chance to discuss your Art for All project. Mason's heartbeat quickened. His passion project, an application designed to bring interactive art experiences to underserved communities through affordable technology, had consumed his thoughts for months. Eleanor had seen its potential immediately, but Mason needed investors who shared his vision. With newfound determination, Mason approached the investor, eloquently explaining how his platform could democratize access to artistic expression across economic divides. Donovan's eyes lit with interest until Connor materialized beside them, champagne in hand. My little brother, the dreamer, Connor said with a patronizing smile. Always thinking art can save the world. Dad's indulged his hobby far too long, if you ask me. The light in Donovan's eyes dimmed as he glanced between the brothers. I wasn't aware this was a hobby project. It's not, Mason insisted, but Connor continued smoothly. Lawrence, have you heard about our firm's expansion plans? Much more substantial than digital finger painting. I assure you, the conversation shifted, Mason's opportunity evaporating like morning mist under harsh sun. He retreated to his distant table, watching as his parents proudly took the stage. Robert Williams' voice boomed through the microphone as he announced Connor's position as partner track at the family firm, the gift of their Cape Cod estate, and a brand new Tesla Model S. To Connor, Robert concluded, the true heir to the Williams legacy. The words cut deeper than any knife. Later, as guests mingled over dessert, Mason confronted his father in a quiet corridor. Will I ever be more than an afterthought to you, he asked, voice raw with emotion. Robert's expression hardened. When you contribute something meaningful to this family's legacy, you'll earn your place. Art doesn't build dynasties. Mason, neither does blind adherence to tradition, Mason countered. Eleanor built something revolutionary by breaking from exactly what you worship. Your aunt is an exception, not an example to follow, Robert dismissed. And this fascination with making art accessible to the masses, it devalues the very privilege we've worked generations to secure. Before Mason could respond, Elizabeth appeared, her perfectly manicured hand gripping his arm. This is Connor's night, she hissed. Don't make a scene. Mason watched his parents return to the celebration, their backs straight and heads high. The picture of success is defined by surnames and bank accounts. He slipped away unnoticed, walking the manicured grounds of Oakmont alone. His phone buzzed with a notification from the LGBT Youth Center where he volunteered. A teenager had submitted artwork for their upcoming exhibition on gender identity. Mason smiled at the raw, powerful imagery on his screen. These were the people who understood what art could truly accomplish, not as a commodity to be hoarded by the wealthy, but as a voice for those society had silenced. In the moonlight, surrounded by the carefully cultivated gardens of privilege, Mason realized that living in Connor's shadow had kept him from seeing his own light, a light that shone in directions his family couldn't comprehend. Perhaps being forgotten by those who couldn't see his value freed him to be remembered by those who needed his vision most. The true measure of worth, Mason reflected, lies not in inheritance or tradition, but in the lives we touch, in the barriers we break. A lesson his family had yet to learn, but one he would carry forward regardless of their approval. As the celebration for Connor continued inside Oakmont's opulent ballroom, Mason found solace in the quieter garden terrace. The cool night air provided welcome relief from the suffocating weight of expectations he could never fulfill. He loosened his collar, gazing up at the stars partially obscured by Boston's ambient glow. Mr. Williams? A voice interrupted his thoughts. Mason turned to find an impeccably dressed older gentleman he didn't recognize. Mason Williams? I presume, yes, Mason replied cautiously. And you are Walter Garrison, Counsel for Eleanor Tech Innovations. The man extended a hand. Your aunt sent me to deliver this personally. Off from his leather briefcase, Garrison produced a thick manila envelope sealed with Eleanor Tech's distinctive logo. She insisted this couldn't wait until tomorrow. Mason accepted the envelope with confusion. "Is everything all right with my aunt?" "Perfectly fine," Garrison assured him with a slight smile, "though she mentioned you might want privacy while reviewing these documents." After the lawyer departed, Mason found a secluded bench beneath a flowering magnolia tree. Inside the envelope lay legal papers with headings that made his breath catch: succession planning and transfer of controlling interest, Eleanor Tech Innovations. As Mason read through the documents, his hands began to tremble. The papers confirmed the unthinkable. Eleanor had named him, not Connor, as her heir and successor to Eleanor Tech's empire. Attached was a handwritten note in Eleanor's elegant script. "Mason, while they've been celebrating Connor's predictable path, I've been watching you forge your own. Those trips to art galleries and tech exhibitions weren't just for inspiration. They were your training. You never noticed how I introduced you to board members as my bright nephew, or had you sit in on the strategy meetings disguised as casual conversations. Your Art for All project revealed what I've always known: you possess something rare, the ability to bridge technology and humanity. Eleanor Tech doesn't need another corporate lawyer. It needs a visionary who sees technology as a means to elevate the human experience, not replace it. They've forgotten you. I've been investing in you." With love and confidence, Eleanor beneath the letter lay detailed plans for Eleanor Tech Innovations, not just a technology company as Mason had always assumed, but a pioneering force in interactive media and creative communication platforms. Eleanor had been building something that aligned perfectly with Mason's vision all along. Mason's mind raced with memories suddenly cast in new light, Eleanor asking his opinion on interface designs when he was just 16, introducing him to renowned artists exploring digital mediums, encouraging his volunteer work with LGBT youth to understand how art could empower marginalized voices. While his family had dismissed his Art for All project as a hobby, Mason had actually designed a revolutionary platform. The application would allow users to create immersive artistic experiences through affordable technology, bringing interactive art to schools, community centers, and rehabilitation facilities regardless of budget constraints. What his family saw as frivolous, Eleanor recognized as the future, technology shaped by empathy and creativity rather than profit alone. A deeper file in the envelope revealed Eleanor's meticulous assessment of Mason's leadership potential. She had tracked his volunteer work organizing art therapy sessions for LGBT youth, noted his talent for resolving conflicts among artistic personalities, and documented his ethical approach to technology design. Eleanor hadn't just been a supportive aunt, she had been evaluating him as her successor all along. As the weight of this revelation settled over him, Mason felt equal parts honored and terrified. The forgotten son was being offered the keys to a technological kingdom, but accepting meant stepping fully into the light, confronting his family's dismissal head-on, and proving Eleanor's faith wasn't misplaced. The sound of applause drifted from the ballroom as Robert likely continued singing Connor's praises. Mason tucked the documents back into the envelope, his mind made up. For years, he had allowed himself to be diminished, accepting his place in the shadows. He had feared rejection so deeply that he had begun to believe their narrative about his worth. No more. Tomorrow, at the formal family announcement of Connor's partnership, Mason would finally speak his truth. He would step out of the shadow of his brother, out of the box his parents had confined him to, and into the future Eleanor had always seen for him. The forgotten son would be forgotten no longer. The fear of standing against his family's expectations still gnawed at him, the lifetime of subtle conditioning that taught him to doubt his own value. But Eleanor's faith offered something stronger than fear, the chance to create a legacy defined not by surnames and traditions, but by innovation and inclusion. After all, true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else matters more. The Williams family law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Boston, its marble reception area a testament to generations of power and prestige. Today, partners and associates gathered in the executive conference room to formally welcome Connor Williams to their ranks. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city Connor would someday help rule, at least according to Robert Williams' grand vision. Mason arrived precisely on our time, or in a home. Eleanor's envelope secure in his leather portfolio. He had dressed with unusual care, a tailored charcoal suit that Eleanor had insisted on buying him last Christmas, with a subtle teal pocket square that matched his eyes. Not the traditional navy blue of Williams' family gatherings, but a deliberate choice. Today was about claiming his own identity. Elizabeth noticed immediately, her eyebrows lifting in surprise. "You look, different," she said, her tone suggesting she hadn't decided whether this was an improvement. "Good different, I hope," Mason replied with a confidence that seemed to unsettle her. He took a seat not at the periphery where he usually relegated himself, but directly across from Connor at the massive conference table. Robert Williams stood at the head of the table, commanding attention with practiced authority. "Today marks a significant milestone for our family and this firm," he began, detailing Connor's academic achievements and promising future. Champagne was poured as Robert announced Connor's first major case, representing a prominent tech corporation in a precedent-setting intellectual property dispute. "And so," Robert concluded, raising his glass, "to the next generation of Williams' legal excellence." As applause filled the room, Mason took a deep breath and stood. The room fell into confused silence. "I'd like to say something, if I may," Mason said, his voice steadier than his pounding heart. Robert's jaw tightened, but social propriety prevented him from silencing his son in front of colleagues. "While today is certainly about looking forward," Mason began, "it seems the appropriate time to clarify what that future actually holds." He removed Eleanor's documents from his portfolio. "Yesterday, I received these from Aunt Eleanor's legal counsel." Connor's expression shifted from annoyance to curiosity as Mason continued. "For years, I've been treated as the family disappointment, the son who chose art over law, who came out as gay rather than meeting your expectations of the perfect Williams heir." Mason's gaze swept across his parents' increasingly uncomfortable faces. "What none of you realized was that while you were focused on maintaining tradition, Eleanor was building the future, and she's been preparing me to lead it." Mason explained the contents of Eleanor's succession plan, watching shock register across the room. He detailed his vision for merging Eleanor Tech's resources with his Art for All platform, creating accessible technology that would bring interactive artistic experiences to underserved communities worldwide. "Technology without humanity is hollow," Mason said, echoing Eleanor's philosophy. "Eleanor Tech will pioneer interfaces that enhance human creativity rather than replacing it, making digital art creation accessible to everyone regardless of privilege or background." Robert's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is absurd. Eleanor wouldn't bypass family tradition this way. Connor is the heir to..." "To what exactly, Dad?" Mason interrupted. "A law firm that serves corporations while Eleanor built one. You've spent so long defining success by your narrow parameters that you failed to notice the world changing around you." Connor stood abruptly. "This has to be some misunderstanding. Aunt Eleanor wouldn't entrust her empire to someone with no business experience, no relevant education. Actually, I would..." Eleanor's voice cut through the tension as she appeared in the doorway, elegant and commanding in her signature style. The room fell silent as she strode to Mason's side. "I've been quietly observing Mason's leadership potential for years," Eleanor explained, addressing the stunned gathering. "While you saw only a disappointing deviation from tradition, I saw someone with the rare ability to merge technological innovation with artistic vision. Exactly what Eleanor Tech needs to remain relevant." She placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. "I watched him develop his Art for All platform on his own initiative, watched him volunteer countless hours with LGBT youth, creating safe spaces for artistic expression when they'd been rejected by their own families." Her pointed gaze swept toward Robert and Elizabeth. "Mason wasn't hiding his potential from you," Eleanor continued, You simply refused to recognize value that didn't fit your predetermined mold. The silence in the room was deafening until a partner from the firm's technology division spoke up. Actually, I'd love to hear more about this platform. We have several clients in educational technology who've been seeking more innovative approaches to creative engagement. Other voices joined in, expressing interest in Mason's vision, while Robert and Elizabeth sat in stunned silence. Connor's expression had shifted from outrage to something more complex, perhaps the first glimmer of seeing his brother as something other than a disappointment. As the impromptu discussion flourished around him, Mason felt a lifetime of invisibility beginning to lift. Eleanor had given him more than a company. She had given him the platform to finally be seen for who he truly was. The forgotten son had found his voice, and with it, the power to rewrite not just his story, but the stories of countless others who'd been pushed to the margins. In that moment, Mason understood that true leadership isn't inherited through bloodlines or bestowed through tradition. It's earned through vision, compassion, and the courage to stand firm when the world tries to diminish your worth. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from fitting in, but from standing out exactly as you are. The aftermath of Mason's revelation rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Some partners leaned forward with interest, peppering him with questions about his vision for Eleanor Tech. Others exchanged bewildered glances, uncertain how to process this dramatic shift in the Williams family power structure. Robert and Elizabeth, meanwhile, gathered their composure and quietly excused themselves, disappearing through the conference room doors without a backward glance. Mason felt their departure like a physical ache, not because he craved their approval anymore, but because he had hoped, perhaps naively, that they might finally see him. Eleanor squeezed his shoulder, a silent reminder that he wasn't standing alone. As the gathering dissolved into smaller conversations, Mason found himself surrounded by technology partners eager to discuss potential collaborations. Through it all, Connor remained at the table, staring at his untouched champagne with an unreadable expression. The golden child suddenly cast in shadow, a reversal neither brother had anticipated. Later that evening, Mason stood on the rooftop terrace of Eleanor's downtown penthouse. The lights of Boston spread before him like a constellation of earthbound stars. Eleanor joined him, offering a glass of her favorite scotch. "How does it feel?" she asked, leaning against the railing beside him. "Overwhelming," Mason admitted. "Part of me still expects to wake up and find this was all an elaborate dream." Eleanor smiled. "I've watched you diminish yourself for years. Mason, shrinking to fit the box they built for you. But true leaders don't conform to existing spaces. They create new ones." "I'm not sure I know how to lead," Mason confessed, voicing his deepest fear. "That's precisely why you'll succeed," Eleanor replied. "Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. Your parents and Connor believe certainty is strength. I've always known that curiosity is more powerful." She explained how her succession plan had been years in the making, how she had watched Mason navigate rejection with resilience, champion others without seeking credit, and pursue his vision despite constant dismissal. These were the qualities Eleanor Tech needed, not another corporate automaton concerned only with profit margins. "The company knows art and technology belong together," she said. "What they need is someone who understands why." A week later, Mason sat in his newly appointed office at Eleanor Tech headquarters, still adjusting to the floor-to-ceiling windows and the responsibility they represented. A tentative knock interrupted his thoughts. Connor stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain in the unfamiliar territory. Gone was the swagger that had defined him throughout their childhood, replaced by a humility Mason had never witnessed before. "Do you have a minute?" Connor asked, remaining at the threshold until Mason gestured him in. The brothers regarded each other across the sleek desk, years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings between them. Connor broke the silence first. "I've been thinking about what Eleanor said," he began hesitantly, "about refusing to recognize value that doesn't fit a predetermined mold. I think I've been guilty of that." Mason waited, allowing his brother the space to continue. "I never saw what you were building because I was too busy following the path laid out for me," Connor admitted. "I never questioned whether it was the right path or even my path at all." The conversation that followed was the most honest they'd ever shared. Connor confessed his own doubts about the legal career their father had predestined for him, his envy of Mason's courage to pursue his own dreams, and his growing realization that perhaps the traditional Williams legacy wasn't worth preserving in its current form. "I'm not asking for a position," Connor clarified, "but I do know corporate law, and Eleanor Tech will need strong legal guidance as it expands into new territory." He hesitated. "Maybe there's a way I could help, on your terms, not as the Williams heir, but as someone with skills that could support your vision." Both for the first time, the brothers faced each other not as competitors in a zero-sum game of parental approval, but as adults with complementary strengths and a shared history that, despite its complications, bound them together. 3 months later, Mason stood before the Eleanor Tech Board of Directors, presenting the formal launch of the expanded Art for All initiative. The boardroom walls displayed several of his own paintings, vibrant abstracts that captured the emotional essence of technological connection. What had once been dismissed as a hobby was now recognized as the philosophical foundation of the company's future direction. "Today, we're announcing the Mason Williams Fellowship," he concluded, "providing funding, mentorship, and technological resources to young LGBTQ+ artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. Because innovation doesn't come from homogeneity, it emerges when diverse voices find platforms for expression." As the board applauded, Mason caught Eleanor's proud smile from her seat at the table. The path forward wouldn't be without challenges, but for the first time, Mason stood fully in his own light, not as the forgotten son, but as a leader who understood that our greatest strengths often emerge from our deepest wounds. Have you ever had to break free from others' expectations to discover your true purpose? What might be possible if we valued people not for how well they fit predetermined molds, but for the unique perspectives they bring? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Heart Stories for more narratives that remind us how our differences become our superpowers when we have the courage to embrace them.